Hey, and welcome to Vivit Talks. Today I'm going to be speaking with Giles Lindsay, who's going to be talking to us about the importance of Agile. So,
Hi, I'm Giles. Thank you very much for having me. So I'm a software engineer, have been for 25 years, and I am now a CTO at a digital company in London. I've sort of spent my career working my way up through the ranks from graduate engineer to where I am today. But also, what's been really important in my career has been the agile track to support everything I do from a technology perspective. So from that perspective, it's been really important that I bring about that sort of agile philosophy, agile mindset, agile approach to everything I do, the teams I look after, the families I created, organizations as well, and to really bring a sense of business agility within that same organization. So that's what I've been doing now for many years. Why I'm really passionate about responsible leadership, why I'm really passionate about talking about the challenges that agile leaders face in the workplace, exactly what my talk about is on Friday at the conference, and I'm looking forward to obviously taking part in doing it.
fantastic intro. So, yeah, it's great to have you on here, and I know there'll be a lot of the listeners that are probably on that kind of same journey, that agile journey that you've been on yourself. And where would you say is a good place to start for those people who are listening?
I think that a lot of people really have to start with understanding the philosophy, those sets of values, the mindset. It's where the greatest success comes from. I think nowadays, that organizational agility change has to start at the very top within any organization. As I often do talk in other podcasts and meetups and conferences, I talk about the sense that when I started my career, I was only able to sort of have a sphere of influence, sort of mid-management, senior mid-management downwards with anything that I was trying to aspire to achieve. And I never had that sphere of influence upwards into the executive teams where really that adoption of business agility really needs to come from. So for me, it's about today, now I'm in that executive position to be able to now have a greater sphere of influence across the organization to really bring about that business agility change. So people who are starting on that journey really need to sort of, understand those fundamentals, the foundations, have that mindset, have that set of values that the rest of us sort of all aspire to do on a daily basis, all about being agile, rather than simply just following somebody who's giving you orders on a daily basis and not being agile in any way, shape or form at all. And then, as I think, it's about your career, trying to obviously have that sphere of influence. The more senior you get in your organization, to try and bring about a sense of change, a sense of those successful business outcomes across a larger part of that organization. Otherwise, as I say, I think you'll suffer many of the pitfalls and failures I have certainly in my career.
Absolutely. I'm going to be slightly selfish on the podcast and ask for some of your advice. So I recently started with a company which is global based. And I'm finding that kind of challenge with being able to deal with teams from different countries who've got culturally different challenges, right? And their level of adoption varies. This morning I was on a call with a team in Italy and France and Spain, and each one of them had different characteristics of how they have culturally adopted agile. Do you find that that's a bit of a challenge for the kind of the one size fits all, the frameworks like dad less safe and those kind of things? Maybe they're organizations that are just trying to pick up and run with the framework, and maybe that's not the way to go.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there are some systemic changes happening even within some of those actual frameworks today. I know, obviously, the latest version of SAFe has become a lot more holistic. DA, for example, you referred to it as DAD, is now a toolkit, right? It's not a framework as such. It's about choosing your way of working, following the 7 core principles of DA to allow you that way of working to evolve across an entire organization. I think a lot of organizations are realizing, or a lot of frameworks, I should say, are realizing that you can't be so prescriptive to try and force a framework into a company. It's about how you wrap a company around a particular way of working. So for me, it's never been a case in the recent years of trying to say, right, regardless of where you are in the world, you follow A to Z and that's it, because you'll never work, you'll never get any successes. It's about evolving ways of working that actually allow that autonomy, that sense of purpose, allowing the right business outcomes to happen wherever you are in the world. So a team in India will operate very differently to a team in Italy, and a team in Italy will operate very differently to a team in the UK, and so on and so forth, globally around the world. It's about evolving those ways of working that actually remove the friction and process wherever you are, in whatever part of the world you're working in, with whatever elements of organizational challenges you actually have, that you want to remove those, the things that are less flexible to change, the friction points, and get your teams to evolve their ways of working so that you actually have those, as I said, successful outcomes.
Excellent. So it's kind of the evolution, isn't it, over revolution, kind of, ripping and replacing
I
a
say
whole.
exactly the same thing.
Yeah, instead of it sounds really good. And I know, I remember, I did a book on Enterprise Agile back in 2008. It was the last time I read it as well. And it was kind of that idea of scaling Agile, like you mentioned, for things like SAFe and the stuff that Dean's done. And I remember kind of with different organizations having different levels of success with things like SAFe, and people would go and do leading SAFe, and they maybe get certified as a Scrum Master or some kind of role within that methodology. And originally I remember Dean and the guys were kind of using blueprints that they kind of taken from Intel. My friend Ray Arel, who runs the Agile Alliance,
Yeah.
he was really kind of trying to help spear that on, and what the lessons that Intel were making globally, whether it was dealing with Mexico, dealing with the US, or any other 120 countries they were in. That kind of started the foundation. And obviously for certain organizations, especially smaller organizations that are a lot more lean and doing maybe things like lean startup, and really having to react so quickly to that maybe those essentials, say, for a cut down version is a better way to start. And how, because there's so many different toolkits, what would you recommend for those people who are kind of a smaller organization that hasn't really got ready for the enterprise or scrum of scrums, or just maybe at smaller teams?
So there's some really good things there. I genuinely think there has to be more thought leadership in this space, and it's great that people are wanting lots more support in this space today. I think there in the past has been this idea of sort of armies of consultants turning up into organizations and sort of saying, we're going to do Agile, we're going to be Agile potentially, but the idea that actually it's our way, we've successfully rolled this blueprint out, this cookie cutter approach in many organizations, and we've made them magically Agile for many, many years. And in some ways, that's going to work wonderfully. But there are going to be many organizations where that doesn't work for. And I think a lot more organizations need support on those things without those armies of consultants coming in to tell them what they need to be doing. And I genuinely believe it's about having those conversations with everyone across the entire organization. I like to also sort of think that the people management team, what a lot of organizations call human resources. I have a personal hang-up with the phrase human resources. I think it categorizes us in the same way as I've said many times, as chairs and computers and tables and other things like that. But that people management team, the part of the organization that has touch points to every other department within that same company, regardless of whether they're co-located or geographically dispersed, are really the team that can help lead this change, this mindset change in an organization. And then, as I said, I think it's down to that organization choosing that way of working, choosing what they want to use to evolve those outcomes which delight the people internally in the organization and ultimately delight the customer as well by delivering the right thing of value to them. And if they want to choose Scrum, if they want to choose Safe, if they want to choose Less, if they want to choose a Kanban approach, whatever it is that they want to use because they think that'll generate the right outcome for them, then great, let's do it. They will also inspect and adapt and evolve all of that. To your point, evolution, not revolution. And they will be able to actually see whether what they're doing today is making a success, whether they're failing fast and they need to tweak something, shift left, shift right, and then obviously succeed faster by trialing something else. And it's only truly going through all of those processes rather than simply coming in and saying you're going to do it this way or you're going to do it that way, where I think the successes will come now, today in 2020, and as we evolve beyond. I think it's been far too long that there's been too many of these kind of prescriptive frameworks in existence, which have actually generated too much friction for too many organizations, which is ultimately why an agile transformation has actually failed within those organizations.
And I know you're the CTO of Digital Ventures. How do you engage with your customers and help them, establish that kind of footprint or take those steps? Do you embed yourself with it? How does that typically work?
As I said, I think for me, it's really key to understand all of the moving parts of the organization. My customers are potentially sales teams and marketing teams within the organizations. And it's about getting them to understand the foundations of what Agile is all about in that organization. How do we bring about some smart thinking? Where do we actually do some value stream mapping that allows us to remove a lot of the waste in process that we are having today that's slowing us down in terms of deliverables? And I think that's the case in any organization. If you can actually map out how you go from idea to delivering the value at the other end and work all the pits and troughs and everything else that you have to go through and all the other teams and departments, finance and legal and marketing and sales and pre-sales and whoever else and engineering obviously, to deliver that outcome, and you suddenly find you've got friction point. It's then understanding what we're going to do as a team together to remove that and how we work through and evolve that so that we try and make it as seamlessly as possible to actually, work as a family and do amazing outcomes.
No, I think that's really interesting. And I was watching a keynote from Gartner quite recently, and it was interesting because they said that there's going to be no more IT projects. And I thought when they said the title, I was kind of hesitant. But what they were kind of saying is maybe the shift, exactly what you said, to kind of value stream mapping, but directly to product, right? Instead of saying, okay, we're doing a project, and that project is X and it'll go on for Y. It was more about, well, we want to enable this agility or this capability to enhance our product or to help with support our customer. And maybe it is changing that terminology and like you said, engaging with those stakeholders that maybe are C-suite and holistically across the organization to get on board with exactly what this new found capability is and how that can help the end customer or the end product which you're trying to produce. Do you think that's a way that things are changing? People aren't thinking about, I need to run a digital transformation project or an agile transformation project. You think they're actually thinking about what's the value of what we're doing?
I think it's an organizational transformation project these days. And I think that's where this sort of the moniker business agility really is coming about. I think people, you can use the same thing. I think a digital transformation is an organizational transformation because of the profound impact it will have across so many other departments. I've spent large parts of my careers working with finance teams and organizations, as I talked about previously, building up, annualized budgets for many multi-millions of pounds, and trying to identify all the things you're going to deliver up front. And 12 months later, you've never delivered any of those things that are actually what you were aspiring to achieve, 15 months earlier as you're building out that roadmap and that's that plan, etc. For me, I think it's about a complete sort of shift in that agility, thinking about funding projects up front for quarterlies, quarterly basis, to understand what we can achieve within that sort of 3-month window. And then again, we're reducing the feedback cycle. We're evaluating what we've actually done within that quarter. Have we actually had successful outcomes? Do we actually now need to ask for more money to actually deliver even sort of better outcomes, evolve the product even better? Or do we actually stop, redivert the money into something else? And I think what you were talking about, product over project, I think is absolutely key now as we go forward. I think people will start funding products rather than projects going forward. And I think the evolution there will be on that graph all the way up to funding teams, because those long-lived teams who can just knock anything out of the park, deliver any sort of thing that's asked of them, will be the ultimate goal that we sort of want to have within our organizations.
Yeah, no, definitely. And this kind of, you're seeing organizations like Google, getting product and engineering, creating product engineering, bringing them closer. I loved when we were doing PI planning, I remember doing big room planning when we were in Santa Clara, and we'd bring everybody in from an exec team. We'd be 2 days. We'd have a ropes on the side, we'd be going through and we'd be breaking into teams. We'd be thinking about, new opportunities of where we could, bring multiple different capabilities from different parts of the organization together to bring new, like you said, products or value streams into the marketplace. And those 2 days were essential, plus the PI planning, like you said, quarterly based to kind of give us that kind of feedback that, are we really, are we making progress? Do we need to be potentially diverting it somewhere else? Do we need to be thinking about something more holistically within the organization? And there's not that many organizations that they might be doing the ceremony at a lower level, your sprint planning or your retrospectives, but when it comes to the big room planning and getting the execs on board, do you see more of that happening kind of recently?
I do now. I genuinely do now. I think too many execs have been sort of, at times, especially in my career, over the last 25 years, sat in ivory towers, far too removed from the day-to-day machinations of what's going on in an organization, far too removed from the voice of the customer within the organization as well. And in that sense, I think getting them more and more involved in those type of big room planning sessions is the future. Even getting them to turn up to reviews and retrospectives at potentially an individual team or department level as well, so that they truly understand what's happening within the organization, can listen to the feedback, can listen and learn how those teams are inspecting and adapting and evolving, taking away the challenges they may have just had in that last iteration, that last quarter of the year, and what they're going to do next to actually overcome them. And those teams taking on that challenge to be able to do that, which is great because they've got the autonomy and the authority and the ownership to be able to do this. So for me, I think, yes, we'll see a lot more of those executives doing it. I think a lot more executives now are sitting in the same office space in those open plan offices now with the rest of the organization as well, trying to remove this sort of sense of hierarchy. I think also the future is a lot of these senior executives devolving their authority to the people who are actually closer to the outcomes to actually allow them to have greater success. Obviously, I classify the command and control gang as the sort of senior middle management within an organization. They're the ones usually who are resistant to the agile approaches that are brought into organizations. And yet actually, if they were given the authority and that authority had been devolved from some of the senior executives down to those people, I think they would actually work with the people who are bringing about the change within the organization and would actually be very supportive of it and hopefully lead it as well.
No, absolutely. I always find it's a bit of a challenge when you look at this because, there's plenty of tools that will help you manage those lower level kind of scrum of scrums and, and Jira, whatever else it may be there in that landscape. But, when you get to the PPM kind of viewpoint where you're clarity and you've got things like, budgets and, those kind of things at the portfolio level, that's a separate tool. And then you've got this pipe dream of an exec scorecards that at that high level where you've got a vision of, well, how are we performing, and how does that link to maybe that strategy? The company said, we're going to 30% improvement in this, or we're going to help our customer achieve that, and these are the timeframes, that maybe years, right, where projects have disappeared by them, but actually still the efficiency gain or the objectives to become carbon, more carbon responsible, or doing some kind of activity which requires teams, projects, products to deliver against. I think it's such a complex landscape, and it's that's I suppose one of the reasons why people are maybe leaning on these frameworks. And I loved what you said on your last kind of interview about, obviously linking back to the manifesto. It's 20 years old now, and it's part of it is things have changed, things are moving, and I personally kind of refer, which I noticed you've got the same connections with, to kind of Tom Gilb as the kind of the grandfather of Agile, right, and his product of Vivit. I've actually got one of his books that he gave me from 1973 here, which and he was talking about this evolutional process. I know we've had XP, we've had all sorts of other methodologies that predate Agile, which were very iterative, right? Even the original Hewlett and Packard in their garage were building and evolving as they in iterations for, back in the start of Silicon Valley. So maybe this isn't new, but it is still really relevant. And your talk coming up on Friday, this it's going to generate so much interest because people still are struggling with this. How can they kind of reach out to you, and how do you help them, and what's the best way to engage with you if you are struggling with those Agile practices?
Sure. I think you've hit the nail on the head, and it is exactly what I sort of very passionately talk about. The fact that the manifesto was only created nearly 20 years ago to remove the friction that software engineering teams, software development teams were facing in those late 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, and probably the late 80s as well. But the idea that this kind of new way, this new mindset to deliver the more successful outcomes, rather than working on 12-month waterfall projects and never delivering what the customer wanted, I think is where that change had to happen. I think the challenge today is, though, we're 20 years in, and yet we are still suffering some of exactly the same challenges that the manifesto tried to create at the engineering team, technology team level. We're still facing some of those same friction points at the organizational level. And a lot of people still today, and I have done a talk recently where somebody afterwards actually came to me and said, I thought it was just for the software teams. And again, it's that mindset piece. They truly don't understand the value of being able to work in a slightly smarter, different way. And I think we have to now solve these friction points, which is what the talk about on Friday is about, and what we do to overcome them, so that the next 20 years we don't suffer them. Okay, I think a lot of people will also have had managers in their careers who will have been really bad, negative, command and control, bureaucratic. I certainly had those people in my career. And when you start your career then as a middle manager, as a senior middle manager, you only copy what those managers and those executives, how they behaved. You copy them. That's all the learnings you've had in your career up until that point. So then as a middle manager or senior middle manager, you become bureaucratic, command and control, micromanagement. And I was really, really bad as a manager to begin with, until I actually had an executive and a CIO who, as I said, was just phenomenal in terms of saying, off you go. There you go, and literally leaving me day one to go and find my feet and to bring about that organizational change within the organization, and starting to overcome those friction points with other parts and other teams in the same company. And I think we still have now to do a lot of work to remove those friction points in organizations. The talk, at the end of the talk, there will be a survey. And the survey is really to capture the people that are attending on Friday. What are their friction points that they're still facing in organizations today? It's a 2-minute survey answering a few questions. And the idea is that we will triage the results from the survey, probably sort of in the final quarter of this year. And we will start trying to categorize the top 10, possibly top 20 things that are still causing the most amount of friction in organizations today, and trying to understand why they're happening. Then beyond that, we're actually going to start doing some workshops and setting up some communities for other people to be part of, so that they can come along and actually help solve some of these challenges. And because I think there's no one simple answer of how we're going to overcome a particular issue. I think we as a community have to come together and solve these things together. And I think that's what's going to be really key as the outcome from this. So there'll be an email address, there'll be the link to the survey at the end of the talk on Friday, where any of the delegates turning up to watch can actually then be part of the community we're trying to build beyond it.
That sounds absolutely awesome. It's like, I know Ray had, was going to Tom sessions, and they do them once a year. I think, having that forum where people can bring their minds together about challenges that they're dealing with, and, we'll have to get you to do a virtual clinic for our community as well. It'd be really good to have you involved. And so just to round up a little bit, so your talk on Friday this week, looking forward to that, and also looking forward to that survey and see what those results are going to be, out of the back of that, and some of those difficult questions that people are having. And so how's the best way for people to get in touch with you? With LinkedIn, Twitter? Do you, how's the best place to connect?
The best place today, I think, for the people that want to sort of be on that journey to evolve it, who really want to also understand what the results from the surveys are going to be, and the findings, is just to reach out on LinkedIn. I think on the conference website, there's a link to my page. But yeah, again, anybody can just, Google me and then find my LinkedIn page and go from there, reach out. I'm very happy to engage with anybody who wants to have that business agility conversation, who wants to be part of that movement going forward, of how we can sort of systemically change the standard ways of behaviors of operating within organizations, and actually bring about a mindset shift where, going forwards in 20 years time, the management within organizations is fundamentally different to what it is today.
Absolutely. And I must admit, I went onto your highlights. You've got a whole stack of all your presentations, and there's YouTube videos, there's links to your old material. Definitely connect in with Giles. So again, massive thank you. Looking forward to your talk on Friday. And yeah, we'll have to get you back to help with the community on some of these challenges everyone's facing.
Thanks. I would love to be part of that.